Welcome back, everybody. This is Adaptation. My name's Kelsey, and that's, who is that?
That's me, Eric.
And we're going to talk about a book today that was turned into a movie.
Yeah.
And that is The Bourne Identity.
Robert Ludlum's The Bourne Identity.
The board.
The Bourne Identity.
bored.
The Bourne Identity.
That might be an apt description of the book because, as we were saying before we started hitting record on this episode, this book sucks.
This book sucked.
This book absolutely sucked eggs.
I wasn't prepared. This book was really bad.
Yeah.
And also, just so that we know where the accountability lies, and I do want to be accountable, I did pick this book.
You did.
Yeah.
And I went along with it.
Yeah, you sure did.
I was a willing participant.
Yeah.
Unknowing, naive, if you will,
Yeah.
to how bad this book was going to be. And I also want to be totally honest with you and listeners. I did not finish this book before we recorded. So you can illuminate on things that I have know nothing about. I did spark notes, the parts I did not read.
Yeah.
So general plot points I am aware of.
Yeah.
But specific details I am not.
Look, I feel like this is going to be an interesting one because I think it'll inform the format of our discussion a little bit. I feel like as a person, I've learned that sometimes if you really commit to a bitter slog, you can learn a lot about yourself as a person. And much like Jason Bourne.
And for sure, I had more fun watching the movie, mainly because I've seen the movie many times growing up.
Oh, sure.
And never having read this book, I thought I would hold that same joy.
Yeah.
I'm not joyful. It's not my favorite movie in the whole world.
Sure.
But I wasn't dreading reading the book.
Yeah. Until
Until about chapter 2.
Yeah.
Where I was like, ugh. I was actively falling asleep while reading this book.
It's brutal. It's a brutal read.
So we can bash on the book a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that's healthy. That's safe.
Oh, yeah.
In our little safe space.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
And go into why the suckiness was different than the movie, and then maybe go into more detail.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, one comment I thought about when I was walking up to your front door, Swader, was the tonage and the sentence structure of the book. If you are familiar with the no-faced man of Game of Thrones,
Yeah.
that's how this book reads.
Yeah.
For way too long.
Yeah.
It's like a blind man doesn't know that he cannot see. Fuck off. Like, I don't want to see that. I don't want to hear that or read that for hundreds of pages.
It was I had also never read the book. And I also was not familiar with how long the book was because my first exposure to this character and this property was the movie, The Bourne Identity, and the series, the sequels that followed. And it's not a perfect movie, but the extent to which they realized they had to chop it down into a fast, like Doug Liman is like known for that sort of fast kind of momentum and that pacing and then plotting in a movie. It really is propulsive in a lot of his work. And to my surprise, he was a fan of the book.
Wait, what?
Which is why he wanted to do it. Yeah.
No.
I can't remember where he was working on Go or he just finished. But he that was his next priority, was adapting The Bourne Identity. And here's the thing. I get that they really took the structure and I want to say character arcs. There aren't any characters in the book. But those arcs and really condensed them into a tightly paced little action thriller.
And maybe he was reading it and being like, I can do this better.
Maybe.
And I want to do this better.
Yeah.
So he was pushing for it.
Yeah. Well, a few chapters in this book, I was so frustrated with it that I literally Googled Bourne Identity book bad. Because I wanted to not be alone.
Yeah, you wanted to commiserate.
And what I found is that a lot of people either straight up just didn't like the book upon its release, or it was a book that they read in high school or like early college and then revisited 20 years later and realized that it was just like juvenile prurient nonsense dressed up to be sort of like high-minded Cold War spy novelry.
Oh, for sure. It was definitely like a concept that could have been great.
Mm-hmm.
But then he's like, I could make it great, but I'm not going to do that.
Well, he thinks... So, this is also my first Robert Ludlum novel.
It's probably my only one ever.
I think it probably will be my only as well. But you can tell... So, there's a great show on Apple TV called Mythic Quest, which is about... Essentially, it's about a video game company producing this sort of large-scale, sort of Baldur's Gate 3 / sort of immersive online video game, fantasy-themed. And they bring on this noted fantasy sci-fi writer from the 60s and 70s. Very pompous, very self-satisfied. And that's how this book reads. It's an author of that time who probably even thought of himself as like a Cold War liberal to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. You can tell in how worldly he tries to present, again, not the characters, the
universe,
the mouthpieces that exist in the fairly one-note universe that he's created, to expound on how wise and what a sage he is.
How smart.
Yes.
How intellectually is an understanding the complex political landscapes to which these people are playing.
Yeah.
But he clearly does not at all.
No.
But you made a good point about like the one note, one tone, one voice.
Yeah.
The entire time I'm like, I cannot differentiate between character voices. It's like when somebody goes to try and do a one-man play and can't do different voices.
Correct.
And you're like, okay. Even the one that bothered me the most was Marie Sinclair.
Oh my God.
And Jason Bourne or David.
Oh, I'm sorry. Marie Saint Jacques.
Saint Jacques. What the heck? Whatever. She's Canadian. She's Canadian, guys.
She's a Canadian.
She's a Canadian. She's from Ottawa.
Yeah.
And that was so like it read so much like the Jaws scene with the wife and the guy at the restaurant.
Yeah.
That I was like, this is what's worse, Jaws or this? That was the entire time I was reading it.
Yeah.
And trigger warning for those, but like there was a assault onto her.
Yeah.
From Jason Bourne, he like literally hits her and kidnaps her and drags her along, and then two worse guys come and get her. And they start to do bad things to her. Yeah. And he comes back and he saves her. And immediately she's in love with him.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
insane. Not a thing that people do. Not how people behave in any of these situations.
I'm sure if you're a little crazy and you have no sense of self-worth.
Yeah.
Maybe. I definitely like the way they presented that character in the movie. Way better. Well,
and a real 180 from... Because here's what's absurd is that I think Ludlum wanted a female protagonist that would in some ways intellectually be the equal to Bourne.
Yeah.
And like he gives her the resume and pedigree that would indicate that. She's a by all accounts genius chief economist who works for the Canadian government. Studied at Oxford. Knows great at riding a horse, apparently. Grew up on a horse farm.
Sure.
It very much the sketch of a person that would be like can handle herself, but she's sharp as a whip. But then she understands when a man has come to save her from other men after he himself did horrible things to her.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's Stockholm syndrome.
It's Stockholm syndrome. Such quick Stockholm syndrome that I'm like, this is not and will not ever be a real freaking person.
Yeah.
And it was so unrealistic. Their interactions and their story of love was not. It did not read even as friendship. It was like
they are saying they love each other within days. Within days of meeting each other.
And
These people aren't real.
And he's like, yeah, well, I mean, they're not lesbians.
And they're never real. I mean,
they're not lesbians getting a Utah truck survey. It's not. But no, they're like people being targeted by assassins, and you can't. That's a stressful situation. They're not gonna fall in love. During that situation. No. But with the movie, the way they flipped the switch and made her into basically a gypsy who got scammed and is just trying to get a visa or whatever. And she's still smart in the movie. But she shows her worth and establishes her intellect in an alternative way. Book smarts versus street smarts. So she's like really street smart. She's like, well, how did you get the notes in the hotel? I was like, I asked him.
Told him I was his personal assistant. That's it.
That's
that.
Yep. And like just simplifying a lot of the stuff that Jason Bourne in both versions makes just overly difficult. And that's how I liked how they presented her smarts in the movie versus being told that she's super smart and does dumb crap in the book.
Well, and I think it's interesting, 100%. And I think it's interesting that the book, so many things are reversed, so many dynamics are reversed from the book to the movie. And Marie is one of the clearer points where in the book, she's this supposedly very intelligent, very well trained, very well educated person with a lot of knowledge about the world. But in the movie, she is lauded as such. But then the universe that she's in treats her mostly as fodder to get born from one place to another. In the movie, all of the official authorities that are reviewing Bourne and his accomplice denigrate this woman, say, oh, well, she's got a shitty family and she exists between her mother and her stepbrother or whoever or whatever. She's nothing. She's nobody. At one point, Chris Cooper says, I don't like this woman. Like, it's the funniest thing in the world. And yet she is, as you said, an incredibly resourceful human being.
She's had to be. But not on paper.
Right.
I mean, they see her as like that person from a horrible background, but you would think that somebody from that background would be resourceful. And they're just like, well, that's not book smart, so like we don't value her at all. You know. And then I think Jason Bourne, Matt Damon in the movie was like pleasantly surprised, like, oh shit, she's not completely useless. Like,
well, I was even thinking the Bourne, as Damon plays him and as he's written in the movie, has a clear understanding of the situation and he incentivizes the drive, incentivizes Marie traveling with him with like $20,000 to drive me to Paris.
Without beating the crap out of her.
And like, they both know that there's something untoward here, but even once that knowledge is sort of assumed or revealed, his position is very much like, you know what, then just give me the money back and I'll go. I'll go away. There is no coercion. There is no threat dynamic. And I think that's the problem, is that Ludlum is, and not unlike Jaws, another terrible book that we read that became a far superior film. You have men making very strange presumptions about how women seek male authority and male domination, that they see the power structures that women have to inhabit and live in with men as comforting to a certain extent. He almost seeks that authority, or Ludlum leads her to seek that authority from Bourne, even at her initial resistance. It's a very strange, very outmoded, and very male-centric way of looking at women in this context.
Oh, for sure. I don't know if Ludlum's still alive. Probably not.
He passed away actually not long before the movie came out.
Okay.
Which is why he's credited as an executive producer on the film.
Gotcha. So I'm sure my partner brought up an interesting point of like, in the time at which it was written and created and or set, what are these views and viewpoints and things for characters, and are they truth at that time, or are they truth in general? He's like, oh, well, it was written in a different time, was what my partner said. And I was like, you're not wrong, but the male gaze that you're reading in the Bourne book is not how women were thinking in 1975.
Yeah.
So it's like that's the male gaze mentality you would expect to see in a male written female character.
Yeah.
But if it was actually, consulted with or even talked to a woman a day in his life or even like had them, look at the pages beforehand and be like, that's not what a person of her intellect, quote, and education level and life experience would do.
Yeah.
Which is like, so it doesn't matter what time it was written, what decade it was set in, whatever. It's a clear, like...
There's no insight. And it's not as though there aren't contemporary works that depict women in stories with more accuracy, with more consideration and empathy.
Mm-hmm.
It's that Ludlum is just one of these guys who sees women in this context as posable things that serve a function in a story, and not just in terms of Marie. At one point, there's this ridiculous subplot that takes him to a haute couture sort of fashion house where one of the characters is, so broad strokes of the novel, Jason Bourne awakes in the middle of the Mediterranean, badly injured by gunfire, by some kind of altercation, we don't know what, and has to track down the weird loose threads of a plot involving a noted European assassin based on a real man, Carlos the Jackal.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, he pulls on one of those threads, and it takes him to none other than a house of threads, a haute couture design firm in Paris.
Of course, they're in Paris. This is Europe.
So I want to read a quote from the book about. He's prefacing the room as he's entering it to describe the woman who inhabits it. There was a bitch quality in the perfumed air. He then goes on to describe her as an aging tigress that like occupies this halls. He describes a lot of older women in the book who were like, she was quite beautiful once. Like it's very like in different verbiage, but like he really genuinely thinks of women as young and vital, or old and having been spent. Even the woman who's at the Treadstone offices in New York is like, she's an old tiger, and she could take him down with a rifle, and then she gets shot in the fucking head. But
I'm shocked because I did not make it far at all in this book. Apparently,
and I really leaned into. I stopped seeing this as a pleasant work of fiction and started kind of seeing it as the journal of a man, it like writing in the late 70s about weird social opinions and sort of Cold War political dynamics. And once I stopped seeing it as a story, because it's not a story, it's Robert Ludlum speaking through different character types
with the same voice.
And it's all the characters are so expository. The repulsive French general later in the book who's like, he talks about his younger wife, the fat man in the restaurant. In fact, at one point, this is absolutely not a direct quote, but it's so derogative of this man who's overweight. He refers to him, the way I wrote it is, it sounds like the fat man fatted his answers fattily. Like it really is that he is so obsessed with talking about this man.
It doesn't matter what else he looks like. We don't even know his color of his hair.
Yes.
We know that he has a sweaty lip and he's fat. And that's it.
And here's the thing. You can...
You can have a sweaty lip and not be fat.
And here's the thing. You can look like... I think you should look and feel comfortable looking like anything. Like anything you want. It's that Ludlum has specifically zeroed in on this man because it reminded me of the Michael Scott joke in an episode of The Office where he's going on the office tours to give his speeches to the various... And he's talking about how he should start writing apology emails to some of these people, except for that one guy who he insulted for being fat, and he can't shut up about it. And then Pam, who's driving, is like, "Oh, Michael!" Like he is. Oh, and that's my other comparison: is that this is basically threat level Midnight, from The Office, which is that it's a man who doesn't understand human beings trying to write about this explosive espionage plot.
Oh, yeah. No, for sure. He has no inner working knowledge of anything.
Yeah.
And I don't think we can say that the movie showed that either, because it was a different plot in the movie. One, it was a plot where he loses his memory, like the book. That's the general thread of a concept. And he's trying to figure out what's happening to him. In the movie, it was more clear that he was a agent of the CIA.
Yeah.
That basically decided not to kill his target.
Yeah.
After, like, I feel like at that point he's like, I want to get out. You know, like, they made it more clear that he was more regretful of his actions and, like, he wants to get out of the system and do it that way.
He grew a conscience.
In the movie more clearly than in the book.
Well, because in the movie, the story is almost completely different. They take some of the bare bones of it.
They take the locations.
And
the basic plot.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. And they to their credit, screenwriter Tony Gilroy and his writing partner, whose name I'm looking at right now, but Tony Gilroy, who is a excellent screenwriter, who's noted right now for producing Andor on Disney Plus, very popular series.
I have not started watching that.
It's very good.
Yeah.
Tony Gilroy is a very sharp, thoughtful writer. If memory serves, also created Michael Clayton, which is an extremely underrated sort of intrigue. It's
more of a thriller.
Yeah, it's more of a thriller, but it's definitely in line of, like, he understands how to build tension. He understands how to create. This was, from what I have read, this was a tough one for Doug Liman because this was the first movie he made that was like big studio picture, and it was really sort of shaped in post-production. But you do still get a sense of Doug Liman's, like, sort of propulsive energy for it. But the story in this case revolves around Bourne being sent by Treadstone, the CIA sub-program, a wet work program, to kill who we're told is an African dictator who wants to essentially bribe or intimidate the CIA into getting him back into power. He gets on the boat. He's about to assassinate the guy, and he sees him with his kids.
Yeah.
And that's when he has this attack of conscience, makes a run, and then gets shot a bunch of times before he jumps off the boat.
Yeah.
And I think this is where the comparison between the book and the movie is really interesting, because the book is really about Cold War Vietnam operatives who are, if we're being honest, still licking their wounds and preening from one of the most horrific war crimes the U.S. has committed in the second half of the 20th century. Series of war crimes. The entire thing was a war crime. Who are still part of that. They call it the pretty good staff a couple times in the book. It's these dudes who were, like, all Ivy League adjacent, at least, who did their time in Vietnam and got out and liked to glad hand each other over alcohol in DC bars. Whereas the movie is it really is a very much, it's 2002, so it's immediately after 9/11.
It was filmed early 2001.
That's right.
Yeah, before 9/11.
Before 9/11.
Yeah, so the gaze of, like, when it was released was very different than what they thought it would be.
100%.
Yeah.
But even there, you have these dudes who were, like,
master spies.
They're master spies, but the dudes who are running the programs are all, the Cold War ended in the early 90s. So these are dudes who were probably coming up during that time, but didn't have their glory days because of the relative peace of the 90s, Pax Americana, compared to the previous decades. And you can just tell that they're like, they just love that they get to send people to shoot other people finally, and they get to fucking, like,
oh yeah, they have underlings, they have agents who are doing their bidding.
Yeah.
And it's all fine and dandy. That is until Bourne goes, quote, rogue.
Yeah.
Meaning they don't know he lost his memory and doesn't know what the heck is going on.
Yeah.
But they're like, oh, Bourne's alive? He must be going rogue. He's coming to get us.
Yeah.
And, like, if you would have just left him the frick alone, he would have just had, like, oh, I have a lot of money and I figured this out eventually. And hey, I don't want to do that. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, he would have gotten to the point where, like, he's not a problem. He doesn't have his memory.
But you just treat him like one of the MK Ultra guys from the mid-century where you're like, this guy's crazy. We don't know.
Yeah. We don't know what he's talking about.
Disavow, sorry.
Yeah. Let him keep his money. Let him keep his girlfriend.
Doing great, sweetie.
Yeah. Get the scooter on the waterfront like she had at the end of the movie.
Very different story. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Sounds great. Really worked out well.
Worked out well for her. I mean, at least in the first movie. But,
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, like, what... anything good about the book?
I
was racking my brain.
Maybe stumped. I feel like, so the essential kernel of the premise, there is something very interesting there, about a spy who has to essentially investigate his own life. Who is there is something, and that's why it became a good movie. This is one of those books that was written to be sold in airport bookshops.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like executives flying from this way or that way can be like, here's a story about a cool fit guy and the women who love him. And then their studio executives presumably read this thing. And, well, the studios tried to get this made in the 80s, made a miniseries starring Richard Chamberlain in 88.
Oh, I did not know that. Because I didn't do much research on this one, guys. I'm sorry.
This is the only thing I enjoyed about this one, was doing the research.
Yeah.
Starring Richard Chamberlain and Jacqueline Smith, one of Charlie's Angels.
Oh, nice.
The original Charlie's Angels. And it got some notice, but sort of the property went dead until about late 99, when they started resuscitating it, when Doug Liman became interested in it again. Yeah, I think that the kernel of the premise is interesting, where there is a 150 to 200 page book in here by a better writer that would be a tremendous beach read, or it's there's something in here that's really propulsive, and in the few moments of the book that I didn't completely despise were typically action oriented, and even those weren't great.
I said the same thing.
Yeah.
I was like, for a movie that was so action packed and choreographed pretty well,
Yeah.
with Matt Damon and the other fighters, the action sequence in this book stunk.
Yeah.
They were bad.
Yeah.
They were over described. They were not even accurate to how I think it would have probably gone. Anyway,
Yeah.
Continue your thought. I was pissed. But
Well, but no, you're 100% right. It reminds me too of.
I was never fought.
No, that's the thing.
Yeah.
So part of the problem is there is an inevitability to Jason Bourne that Ludlum is telegraphing, so that when we get into these situations, we know it's going to work out. We know he's going to get out. A couple times he hurts his hand and it heals surprisingly quickly.
Broken
A
fingers.
lot of wounds that heal surprisingly quickly.
Yeah.
And we're given the image of sort of this immortal man.
Yeah.
And so there's no tension there. I actually think of another Matt Damon adaptation that we discussed, The Martian, where the best passages in the book are this guy talking about how fucked he is.
Yeah.
And because you need more of that in this book. Because if there are moments in the book that I connect with for a moment, it's where he is all of a sudden very confused and disoriented. You needed to carry that disorientation through more effectively for any of those more tense sequences to work.
When he got knocked down the stairs, you mean,
Yeah.
it was the first one. And you're right, he heals really quick. I tweaked my back the other day.
Yeah.
I can't imagine doing half the crap he's done with the tweaked back.
Yeah. Yeah.
A broken hand, he got shot. Well, granted, he had a decent amount of time getting from the wounds from being shot, but then he was shot again, had a head wound,
Yeah.
hurt his... Pretty sure he dislocated his shoulder. He was going to pass out from a concussion. I can make it away from here.
Sure.
No, you need to believe that your protagonist is in real danger, so when they survive, it's like a hoorah.
There needs to be some payoff to the danger.
Yeah.
It's the Jaws of it all. It's the reason that movie is great is that Spielberg understood that you have to create a situation in which you are genuinely worried that these men will not make it back to shore. It is a terrifying situation, and when you give up that sense of tension, then it's just pointless and inert.
Yeah. Well, there's parts of that you could see in the movie as well that they kind of skirted around by using when the two assassins come after him. When they limited the amount of characters in the movie, which I respect. They needed to cut down those people.
Oh, yeah.
There was way too many characters who are all described the same.
Yeah.
and two of them were like the assassins, like gold rim glasses guy who died early on. He's in the book, I mean in the movie as like the professor, assassin, and then there's the blonde guy. But when he's fighting the blonde guy in the movie, instead of you like, oh, Jason might seriously get hurt, because he's pretty much winning the whole time.
Yeah.
He beat the guy and the guy killed himself.
As of a final act of like no connections to Treadstone, no connections to the CIA.
Yeah. So it's like instead of, because I feel like they would have ran into that same issue of there not being enough tension with him almost dying.
Yeah.
You can't do that every single act in a movie. It's gonna be boring along with the book.
Sure.
So I guess they went I'm such a badass assassin, I'd rather kill myself than let any info slip.
Yeah.
So I think they circumvented that little hiccup from the book.
Yeah.
And doing those smaller things in the movie. Even like the gold rim glasses guy, when he gets shot, he's like trying to explain to him like, we're the same thing. I don't want to have to do this either.
Yeah.
And then he dies. So,
yeah. Well, and a lot of what I liked about the movie is a lot of it really, I think, displays a lot of the strategy and sort of ruthless intelligence of a person like this. There are a couple sequences in the movie that I thought worked and still hold up pretty well. One was the car chase is very fun. It's very well shot. Mm-hmm. It's very exciting. The final beat. Well, so the beats that precede it are him instinctively asking her, so do you take care of this car? Yeah. Like, what kind of shape is it? And he's like, well, it kind of leans to the left. And he's like, oh, okay. So that, what nonchalantly, and then boom, off, trying to evade the police. They scram, they pull into a parking garage. No dialogue spoken between them the entire time. They pull in, they stop. There are several beats of silence. And then they look at each other and Bourne just says, yeah, so we can never come back to this car again. And it's very funny.
It's good.
And it really shows what a clever strategist Bourne should be, is supposed to be. The other sequence is featuring Clive Owen's character, the professor. Mm-hmm. They eventually adjourn to a farmhouse in the French countryside. Or English countryside. Because they're in England. French countryside.
Yeah, they're still in France.
Yeah.
I think they're pretty much there the whole time.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So they adjourn to an old. It's kind of implied that it's an old flame of Marie's to an extent.
Her friend, or I thought at one point it was her stepbrother.
Maybe there's something going on there.
Like, they know each other.
There's some relationship, and we don't know what it is. They never really clarify.
But he has his daughters there with him.
Yeah. It's yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's her stepbrother.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. No, you're right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's when he realizes when they have a dog, and the next morning when the dog hasn't come back in for breakfast, Bourne is immediately like, okay, so everybody needs to go in the basement right now.
Yeah.
And then everything after that is just really, really well paced, really cleverly shot. He shoots looks like a propane tank or a gas tank outside to create a distraction, so that Clive Owen from a distance can't like snipe him. And he uses that to run and really get a pace and an advantage. There's a great sequence where he shoots to distract birds when Clive Owen winds up in a field so that he doesn't know where to aim. Mm-hmm. And then he eventually takes him down. It's very clever, very well shot. And it's not... everything isn't the first fist fight with the blonde guy in his apartment, where he knows he has to keep his distance from these people because they are extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
And he has to work out every possible angle going into the situation. It's not a fist fight. Mm-hmm. He has to figure this out.
There's a great sequence in the movie that kind of correlates to how shitty the book is as well, which is not happening a lot, folks.
Yeah.
When they're in the diner talking about like, I know that there's 4 exits out of this place. I know that person does this. I know that this person is wearing that, and that there's a gun in that truck outside. How would I know that if I was not someone who needed to know that?
Yeah.
And that is a great condensation of more than half of the book.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Especially the first half of like, I don't have my memory. I don't know why I know these things, but these are the things I know, and they've been useful. But in the book, it's like, well, I don't know. Like the inner monologue in italics is like, well, I don't know why I have to do this, but calm down, get back into the situation. You got this. It's basically like giving himself a pep talk and then coming out on top with no explanation as to why. Because in the diner scene in the movie, it's pretty early on where you're like, he knows how to do some shit, but he's not over about it. Sorry. He's not overt about it.
Yeah.
He's not like eyes bulging, looking around, like
yeah.
He's scanning the perimeter. He's just like, yeah, I see that person in the corner and them over there. And like,
he's a company man.
Yeah.
And the reason he was recruited is because he has a certain kind of intelligence, perception, and that's why he's around, because he is supposed to be able to nonchalantly spot and commit immediately these details that could be critical regardless of whether or not they become so. Mm-hmm. It kind of reminds me of there's one of the lines in the book is that we're constantly made to believe by Marie that he's a kind man, that he secretly could not have been this awful assassin, Kane, that he's supposed to be. That was really an invention of Treadstone to coax Carlos into a position where he's essentially jealous of another assassin.
Yeah. Getting
one-upped by an assassin in Asia and then eventually in Europe. And she insists that he's too kind to be this man, except that nothing that he does to her specifically indicates to us that he's an inherently kind man. He's an operator and a violent guy.
But it's funny, he says that. He's like, no, like
I'm clearly a piece of shit.
I came back to the river. And he was lying about this. I came back to the river so I can kill that guy because he saw me.
Yeah.
Not to save you.
Yeah.
And it would have been better if he hadn't hit her in the first place or been violent to her in the first place. Then the impact of him saving her and their love story would actually have roots.
Yeah.
But it didn't.
Yeah.
It was like, no, I came to kill that guy who was raping you or whatever. But no, you saved me. Well, yeah, I saved you, but like...
Yeah. Well, that's the problem is that, like, they do a much better job in the movie of show, don't tell.
Yeah.
Why is Bourne... What strikes you about this guy as being, like, compassionate or empathetic? And they do a pretty good job of showing that. And how he generally treats her. There's a tense moment with the Paris police, or they're trying to do the police, and they're in an alley, and he's trying to impress upon her, like, this is what we have to do, and this is this and that. It's the closest they get to the Bourne of the book.
Yeah.
Where he's more excessively authoritative and sort of abrasive.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you get the image of a guy who has found his conscience. His concern for the kids when they're at the farmhouse, the various gestures that they commit, really do show you that, okay, he is a kind man. Yeah. They do a very good job. There's a real economy to how they mete it out over the course of the movie.
They justify the love plot.
Yeah.
You did not do that in the book.
Yeah.
You do not justify a love plot like that.
It's Stockholm. The only way I can think of it in the book is it's Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah. But in such quick succession, she wasn't kidnapped for months.
Yeah.
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 I'm like...
And the author also is responsible for creating the moral framework of the universe. And in that moral framework, she doesn't have Stockholm Syndrome. She's just in love with him.
Yeah, she's just in love with him. Which makes no sense. But unless she's toxic and she's crazy. But they don't paint her as crazy. They paint her as a smart, intellectual person. I am concise. I am like methodical. I'm like, really? Are you methodical?
Yeah.
When did that happen?
Yeah. And like, is she so just excited to be in this whirlwind adventure around Europe? I don't know. Like,
I don't know, maybe.
That seems to be part of the implication for Ludlum. And it's just nonsense. The book is complete dreck, and it is genuinely a credit to Lyman and Gilroy that they pull this out in a way that makes it
palatable.
They extract. Good. They really do extract the basic spine of the book and just shorten it and reform it so that it feels human.
I can see how they did that because I was doing that as I was reading. I would read the first sentence, I would skim, read the last sentence, move on to the next page, still fall asleep. I think that's what they did. Mm-hmm. They didn't fully read it. Yeah. Because it's better that way.
No, because there's no... I really struggled through this one. And there were points early on, especially... where like I would try to get through a passage and think, this is am I wrong for disliking this? Is there something wrong with me? And then eventually finally that's when I had to Google it and be like, Bourne book bad. Like, and people were like, it's not great.
It's not great. Well, coming over here, I was like kind of ashamed that I didn't finish this book, and I was like, because I had a similar feeling when I was reading The Martian, funnily enough, because but that was boring to me for a different reason.
Sure, yeah.
That was boring because science, and I know science. And then this one is boring because it's bad. So, but I had that same feeling, and I was like, maybe it's just me.
Yeah.
Maybe it's very niche. It's just not my thing.
It would have been the funniest thing if you came over and I was like, oh, it's like my favorite book. I'm so glad I picked it.
I would have been so pissed off. When you said you also hate it, I was like, whew, thank God. I'm never going to finish this book, Swader.
Yeah.
I'm never going to do it. I'm never going to read the sequel.
Yeah. I wanted to push. And, like I said, I at some point, I just got through it by disconnecting from it as a story and thinking of it as a time capsule and sort of an artifact of like sort of American Cold War
of a shitty
thinking.
time.
Yeah, essentially that where it's a justification of. At one point, I'm reading it and I'm like, I'm trying to think of the basic moral premise for this book, and it's men in control creating order. Like that's what it's supposed to be about. Is this idea that there are men who should be in control of this sort of complicated international politics, who are like sometimes doing awful things, but they're doing it because you have to create order in society. When he's abrasive to Marie, it's not that he's a bad man. He's using control to get out of a situation so that he can complete the ultimate mission, finding himself. like that's essentially what Ludlum is getting at.
He kidnaps her and beats her.
Yeah.
Because he's finding himself.
It's a means to an end.
It's a means to an end.
And again, it is extremely reflective of that time, but it also doesn't justify it. I think that's the thing that's important to understand, is that you can't look at these books and say,
oh, yeah,
well, it was a different time and like whatever. No, because there were other better authors writing these characters and women in general better.
Most authors.
More thoughtfully, yeah, exactly.
Most every other author.
Yeah.
Every other author.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, easily.
I feel like, wait, who's the writer of Jaws?
Oh, he was some New York media guy. Peter Dinklage. He was Mr. Peter Benchley, who was a New York journalist, who was sort of a liberal intellectual at the time. Well, he certainly thought of himself as sort of that sort of hobnobbery, like, because I do think, and okay, so this is another weird tangential thought that I had, which is that there's been this weird thing that's happened as social politics has necessarily changed. Mm-hmm. For a lot of men, it changed their political identity. Like, you have a lot of guys who were serious, mean-spirited womanizers. Guys like JFK, one of the most notable Cold War liberals, and like a war hero and somebody that would have been lionized by people at that time.
Oh, yeah. There's a certain level of misogyny that was present on both parties.
Yeah. And that was the thing, is that it was crucial for a lot of men in America, was that you just don't talk about it. If you just talk about, sort of FDR, well, it was sort of like FDR liberalism as the idea of, we're creating the social welfare state, which is good, but we're ignoring every other problem that we have to deal with, which is bad.
Yeah.
It's the same reason that nobody touched civil rights seriously until the 60s. Mm-hmm. It's the same reason that there was no serious effort from either political party until the 60s and 70s to do anything about women's rights. There was it's because it was controlled by men who liked those institutions and that politics and discourse, as long as they didn't have to think about themselves and what they were doing as part of a coalition.
Oh, for sure. I just recently rewatched On the Basis of Sex.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, oh, well, like, you're going after this one tax law that discriminates against men and saying it's discriminatory and we should just make it a, not great thing.
Yes.
And the men's side, who are all of her professors at, I think, Harvard, were like, no, well, like, I don't know why. If we give them one, they're going to want to take it all.
Yes.
And if we give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. Yeah. Even though they deserve the mile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a great show, limited series that came out, I think it was actually during COVID. It was called Mrs. America. It was on FX, starring Cate Blanchett as Phyllis Schlafly, about the ERA and the passage of the ERA. And I kept thinking about the men, So the power structures that created an anti-feminist woman, and the power structures that the men that lifted her up because they liked that voice, and that's how resistant everybody was to that coalition and bringing new voices into political discourse, and how everybody else on the left is ultimately marginalized and their voices are stifled, and they're like, it's this mindset that also informed this book.
Oh yeah.
And I thought about that much more than I thought about any of the characters in the book as I was reading it. Like,
oh yeah, I didn't think about the plot that was non-existent. The plot that could have been, you know.
Yeah.
And the entire time I was like, ooh, I was just like cringing for the most part.
Yeah.
But we also have we live in 2025, so again, there is the argument that it was a different time. It was, and I'm sure it was way more popular back then because they had more mindsets that were similar.
Sure, yeah.
And we do not share those mindsets later.
Yeah.
We're like, no. So we can't look at this in how he originally intended it to be looked at.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because we're not those people.
Well, we're not, and
it's great,
and we don't see the illusion of the value of that system has been shattered, and there are people who are trying to keep it around, who are trying to fight like hell to keep it in place, and if anything, worsen and denigrate the progress that's been made.
Yeah.
But that is, if there is a reason that I finished this book that makes me happy inside as a person, it's that I just read it as an historical document about a guy using a loose plot and bad archetypes to expound his own weird social politics. And to that extent,
questioning your whole
I mean,
your whole reality.
I mean, look, life might be pointless, but it is worthwhile. and in that is how we create structure in our life, and that is what Ludlum failed to do in this book.
Oh yeah. Do anything resembling any happiness and structure.
It's to create worth out of the clay of existence. And
this was a piece of shit.
This book's a piece of shit that didn't do any of that.
Didn't get molded.
He formed shit out of shit.
He formed shit out of shit. It didn't look like a Jesus-shaped shit.
It's terrible.
It was just terrible.
And it's not that, like, I'll say this. The movie doesn't do much. Well, no. Okay, so Marie's a really good character.
In the movie.
Yes. And then... God, I'm like terrible with names today. The CIA aide for Treadstone living in Paris.
Oh, the chick?
Yeah, played by Julia Stiles.
Julia
Stiles.
I was going to say The Last Dance lady.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who, and I actually thought about that this is really it feels like her first really adult role.
She was coming off
outside
of 10 Things I Hate About You.
Yes.
And like all of those rom-coms in the late 90s. This was her first big girl.
Well, and they expand her in the sequels that follow, which have even less to do with the premises of the books.
Beautiful.
Because they're like, well, we can make more out of this. And the sequel, directed by Paul Greengrass, is even better.
Oh, I loved this entire series growing up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. This was a top family watch.
The one thing that I think is interesting, and it came up a little bit in Hunger Games, is this is really heavy in the period of shaky cam action cinematography.
Oh yeah,
because it is very forgiving for shoot time, I'm assuming, in performances where you can sort of edit. It's easier I'm assuming it's easier to edit a shaky cut of sort of intense action than it is to do like John Wick style.
Oh yeah,
where you have to really intensely choreograph.
You're not matching that crap in the frame. You're doing it. You can hodgepodge it. It's very music video action. Like, it's not beautiful.
Well, this is where I wanted to get your 2 cents, because I remember years ago we had discussed the movie Hardcore Henry a little briefly.
Yeah, the GoPro movie.
Yeah. And it's the philosophy of action in films, I think, is really interesting. And this is such a formative period for like so Matt Damon even made a joke. He was on Jon Stewart or something, and somebody was like, he was reading reviews of the movies, and he was like, can someone give Paul Greengrass a fucking Steadicam? Like, it's not like I'm getting seasick.
This is the Steadicam era too.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's not like it's not unheard of. But there needs to be a purpose. I think in the sequel, and we're getting off on a tangent, the sequel did the shaky cam for, I think, simplicity's sake and not for story worth.
Yeah.
So, like, we made the comment, or Julie made the comment in the Hunger Games, that when they get into the arena, it gets really, like, sci-fi, steady, like, hardcore cam in the arena, and then it cuts to beautiful camera work for the show of the arena. Yeah. And I think in the second one, they're like, oh, we gotta do this fast, to be action, action, action. But the reason they did it in the first movie was because his mind was unhinged. Yeah. And it reflected, the camera work in the first movie reflected him in his current state. Yeah. But you would think in the second movie, he's gotten his memory back and enough to understand that the camera work should have cleared up, actually. Yeah. In the second one. So that's fascinating. If you're going that in depth, or they're just lazy and want to shoot it really quick.
That's true. And also, you figure if the studio's like, well, the first one did well, and why break it?
Shakier.
And then
Make it shakier.
100%. And you hire Paul Greengrass, who had also made Flight 93, and like who would go on to make Captain Phillips and all these, who is
shaky movies.
That's just his thing. Yeah. He just likes it. So one wonders if they were like, Doug Liman's doing other stuff. Who else shakes the camera a lot?
We need a shaker, guys. We need a shaker. Yeah. Greengrass? Yeah. He shakes.
That guy shakes a lot.
He shakes a lot.
Yeah.
He's basically like a little baby chihuahua.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It's crazy. But the camera work for me, it wasn't special. Like, it was a lot like other movies.
It was very serviceable.
Of the time. Yeah. And they're fun to watch.
Yeah.
I didn't hate it.
Very stylistically, very much of its time, in terms of you can sort of feel a long shadow of the Matrix in terms of like the soundtrack. Very heavily techno sort of paced, sort of like even sort of mixed in with sort of European beats and sort of European DJs and some of their work.
Zurich German, like.
Yeah, really propulsive. Even ends with Moby. Like it's very like very much of a time. Very like. You could tell sort of leaning a little more MTV in terms of some of its pop cultural choices, which makes sense. You're trying to get younger viewers. You're trying to get a broad audience. You're trying to make a 4-quadrant movie.
They got me.
Or 3.5.
Yeah.
And like that was something that I kept noting. And for the most part, it works pretty well. There is some atrocious green screen I noticed in a couple of spots.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not great. But when I watched it for the first time when I was like 10.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that crap.
Neither did I.
Yeah.
I didn't care at all. And part of me wonders if it was just the resolution that I was seeing at the time.
Might
I wonder
if
that played a role.
Or our eyes are more attuned to green screen stuff.
Oh, yeah,
now.
that's true.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm watching The Mummy. I watch it every single year. And I'm like, as I've gotten older, I'm like, this special effects are not great. Yeah. But they're not bad for the 90s.
And they are in service of the story.
Yeah.
I think that's important. And I think this is a movie where I can mostly forgive the really garish stuff, because a lot of the stuff that really works is really nicely made. Like the car chase works really well. The Clive Owen showdown works really well. Like a bunch of sequences work really beautifully.
Rock climbing along the side of the bank.
100%.
I loved it.
Works really, really nicely. Very tense.
To basically take all the tension from the first 200 pages of the book.
Yeah.
Make it into a rock climbing
sequence.
100%. So.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up, and same questions. I have my answers in my brain hole, but which do you think was better? I don't know why I asked that. Okay. Do you think that this deserves a remake? And if so, when and what form?
I think so I think it's probably going to be due pretty soon, probably in a couple of years. The last movie, the Jason Bourne, because it goes, I think it was Identity, Ultimatum, Supremacy, Legacy, starring Jeremy Renner, and then Jason Bourne. They bring him back. They bring Matt Damon back.
I did not watch all those.
Neither did I.
Realizing, yeah.
I saw up to Legacy. I've seen everything up to
Jason Bourne.
I haven't seen Jason Bourne.
Okay. Which
is funny because it brings us to one of the great memes of the modern era. Jesus Christ, it's Jason Bourne. And it's been, I think, 10 years almost since they made that.
Okay.
It's been pretty dormant since then. So I could see this being like Amazon has really leaned into. They own James Bond now.
They have James Bond. They have Jack Reacher.
They do all the Tom Clancy stuff they have. I think they still have like Without Remorse, and they have what's his fuck that Krasinski's playing right now from Hunt for Red October and all that shit. Jack, whatever his fucking
Jack
name.
Reacher?
Not Jack Reacher. It'll come to me.
Jack Pusher?
Hold on. Hunt. She should be Jack. That's the satire that I started writing in my mind of this book, which I do still want to work. It has actually something to do with the death of the Pope, R.I.P.
Oh no.
It's a book called Basis Pontiff, which is about the CIA putting a fake pope into the Vatican to kill the Fed chair because he won't raise the interest rates.
Of course.
It's a really complicated, it's great. It's a great idea.
Yeah, I want this fleshed out. I'm on my desk by Monday.
I'm working on it. I got a treatment.
Thanks.
It doesn't, nothing matters really. But Jack Ryan, another
Ryan.
Jack.
Other Jack.
One of other, because they're all Jack or John or whatever. Or Jason.
There was one, I was listening to a podcast and one of the names for a detective was like, what was her name? It was Danielle, like Danielle Trider, or like a detective name, you know, like. And the host of that podcast, My Favorite Murder, folks, was like, she was born to be a detective.
Yeah.
And like Jack or Tom Clancy or whatever, or even name another like white American hero name.
Who is Die Hard? John McClane.
John McClane. Captain America's real name
is what's his face? Steve Rogers.
Steve. Yeah, Steve Rogers.
Yeah.
Those are all names where you're like, you're born to be this role.
Buck Gunlow. Yeah. But it is those guys, and it's so yeah. I think probably Amazon or somebody has the options. I think this is. I watched this by doing a free trial of MGM Plus.
Nice.
Which I think is a subsidiary of Amazon now. If I recall correctly, they own that.
They've taken over the world.
So my guess is that that's what they're going to do. Is probably do a miniseries or some kind of a movie. What do you think?
I think it's going to be a TV show on Amazon. That's my first thought, just because they already have that built-in audience for it. I think it's going to happen in 5 years. 5 or 6 years.
I think so too.
And
it's almost certainly in development now.
Yeah, it's going to be a miniseries.
Yeah.
Does it deserve to be remade via the source material? No. If you take the movie as the source material for the show, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because that's the thing, is there is a kernel of something there. That's interesting, that I imagine somebody flying from New York or Chicago to Los Angeles, some guy who worked at their studio was like, yeah,
this is awesome.
And then they kept failing to do it, and finally they're like, I don't know, miniseries, punt. I don't know.
You say kernel, and I just imagine like, oh yeah, this is the kernel of a great idea.
Yeah.
And then you overcook it on your stovetop popcorn, and it burns.
It's burned like shit.
It burns like shit.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, that's an idea that it's popcorn.
At one point in its cooking, it smelled like corn.
Yeah.
And you were like, this should be good.
And then it's not.
Too much time.
Too
long.
Yeah.
Burn the corn.
Burn the corn.
Robert, you burn the corn.
100% burnt corn. I'm gonna get that tattooed on my arm. Robert, you burnt the corn.
New merch alert, burn the corn. Don't burn the corn.
I actually might add that to my movie theme sleeve I'm planning.
Hell yeah.
And my film sleeve wrapping up my arm, and I'll have popcorn in between.
Don't burn the corn.
Don't burn the corn. I'll have one burnt kernel right there.
Yeah.
Symbolizing all of my life's mistakes. Like, I have regrets.
Don't burn the corn.
Don't burn the corn. Yeah, I think we're in agreement. Booksuck movie was pretty good.
Oh yeah.
It's gonna be remade into an Amazon TV series.
Yeah. Who do you think would play Bourne? Who do you like for Bourne? you're casting this tomorrow?
I feel like the people I have in mind would be good if they made it right now, but they're not going to make it right now. I think it's going to be filmed in 5 years. Unfortunately, I think that the Chris from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, Pratt.
He's a top.
Pratt might get it. Yeah,
he's a top runner for that. And then also, how old are we going?
Well,
That's
so
the thing.
it's in the book. It's estimated that he's somewhere between 35 and 40.
Okay.
So in Hollywood, you could get somebody who is 42 but looks 38.
You could get 21.
Yeah.
And play 30. I would say. I mean, another one I like is Sam Coughlin. He played Finnick.
Oh yeah. He'd be really interesting for this.
Yeah, I think he's gonna be like early 40s by then.
Yeah. But that works. I mean, that's
works.
the thing is they just have to read that way, because there's even the book gives a certain degree of grace.
Or Jamie from Outlander. I mean, he'd be pretty good. He's already been a spy in like the other movie. He did great. So.
Yeah. I also think too, you could go. I mean, that's the exciting thing about it too, is you could go completely out of the box and go with
woman.
An actor. A woman could be an interesting angle. I think you can go with an actor with a different ethnicity. Doesn't have to be a white actor.
That's true.
I think there's a lot to this.
Going off Matt Damon whiteness.
Yeah, but okay, but like also, I think that's what's so when Amazon did Without Remorse, which was one of Tom Clancy's books, they turned the white character in that into I believe it was Michael B. Jordan.
Yeah.
And it's a great, compelling work, and it doesn't really fucking matter, which is great and exciting and cool.
That would never work if they were going off of the book. The movie they could, but the book makes him out to be a completely generic white man that's very interchangeable and blendable.
But that's the exciting thing, is the more you work against Robert Ludlum's premise, the more you sort of broaden your opportunities there.
That's true. So I think if they're doing it based on the movie, absolutely. If they're going to try and keep it to the book, there's no way a person of color will be Jason Bourne.
Sure, yeah.
Unfortunately, but yeah, we have high hopes for the future that the book will never be remade directly.
Yeah.
And the movie will be, it could be a TV show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all she wrote, folks.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one.
Yeah.
We will see you hopefully in 2 weeks. Life has been crazy. We made a post about it. We're not going to fall behind again.
We got plans. We got a plan, all right?
Plan.
And I'm not just somebody shouting into a microphone that I have a plan. I'm a normal person who has a plan.
Is shouting into a microphone.
I'm a normal person shouting into a microphone that I have a plan.
Exactly. Exactly. So, all right. Well, check us out on the social medias. Adaptation Pod on Instagram is our most convenient feature on the social medias.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we do have a Facebook page. I never really post on it.
Yeah.
And TikTok is closed off to the world. So, are we on Blue Sky?
I am creating a presence using my profile, but I'm going to start working on creating a presence there, so you can follow us on Blue Sky and Skylight, their new emerging little TikTok clone.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, we'll get right on that. But have a great rest of your days, weeks, months, and years.
Love you guys.
All right, bye.
Bye.